Well, hi everyone. My name is Russell Davies and welcome to another edition of RUC People. And this morning I'm joined by Dr. Heidi Segal, who is someone who's been a member of our church for a few years now, or at least come to our church for a few years now. I think a member for a shorter period, but Heidi and her family, Derek and two children, have been part of our community. So it's great to see you this morning, Heidi. Thanks for making time on your precious Saturday morning away from family.
It's good to be here, thanks.
So Heidi, you are known to some of the people here, I think, through your work with the task force and Outliers, and we'll get to that a little bit later on, but I thought it'd be nice just to go back to the beginning and just hear a little bit about your background, where you were born, where you grew up, something of your family.
Mm-hmm. Hi everyone, I was born in Retreat, down in the southern suburbs. My parents and us, we moved to Namibia quite early on. My dad was working up there, so we lived there for the first few years in Swakopmund.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I had to go to school, they checked us in at the local creche, because my name is Heidi, and it was a German school, so I got in.
Oh,
I didn't speak a word of German. And then when it came time for me to go to primary school, they went and applied, and I was accepted, and my mom bought me a little brown, those little brown bags that you used to remember these. And I was all ready for school, and when we got there, the principal said that the school was full. And so they very quickly put me on a plane, and I came back to Cape Town and went to Segal Primary School. And so throughout my life, I thought that the school was full. And I only discovered much later on that actually what happened was that my identity number was that I was coloured, and so I was not allowed to be in the school, because this was in 1976 or something. So that's why my parents had to get me home to Cape Town to go to school here.
So how did that work? Your parents were living in Swakopmund, but you had to come back to Cape Town?
My grandparents were living in our house in Cape Town. So
right. So experienced systemic racism from a very
But I know it, yes, I just thought school was cool.
Oh, wow. And what kind of work was your father
My
doing?
dad worked on a uranium mine.
Very live debate still here in South Africa. Okay. And so how was that for you, living away from your parents with your grandmother going to school in Cape Town?
Oh, it was great. I had lovely grandparents, and I had a neighbour who I was very fond of. And to the extent that my parents had to build a gate between our houses so that I could go there, because I was there most of the time. Mrs. Rosia, and she looked after me, and so I wasn't forlorn in missing my parents or anything, so it's good.
And were there siblings as well?
Yes, but the younger ones only came. My parents eventually moved back to Cape Town with my grandparents, passed my grandmother. So, and then they came to school.
Okay, and how many children?
We're four. I'm number 2 of 4.
Okay.
But I somehow had the eldest child syndrome.
And did your older sibling have the same issue with the school in Namibia?
He was at a school in Heathfield, and so when I came back, he came to Segal Primary as well. Because he was with my grandparents.
Oh, already?
Yes.
Okay. So, how were your school years? Did you enjoy them?
I love school. School was great fun. So, you were
a good student, a keen student.
It seemed to come easily, so I didn't have to worry about it too much.
And were you a sort of a sociable child? What sort of personality were you at school?
I'd like to think so, but I did a lot of other things. So I did swimming and ballet, and always busy with something, quite involved in the church as well. So lots of friends all over the place. Retreat was just a space where everybody knew everyone. And so, especially during holidays, we'd all gather in the local park and play there till sunset, and then we all had to go home again. And so really grew up in a community of people, all connected via swimming or ballet or the church. Yeah.
And in those years, did race play a part in that sort of upbringing?
obviously from my parents, but I wasn't aware of it until much later. I think the 85 riots, so I would be in standard 5, grade 7, was when I first started figuring out like, what's going on? Why are people acting, you know? And so that's when my journey in questioning the system started. And then I went to South Peninsula High School, baptism by fire. And that was really a formative part of my justice journey, was at the school. Under Brian Isaacs' guidance and
Okay, would you say a bit more about that?
I think Mr. Isaacs, our principal, you might know of him, he's quite outspoken and has taken the WCD to task on a number of occasions. And even back then, this is not pre-democracy, stood up against the education department and said no to things when. So, like, silly example, we South Peninsula High School, and I think there was a time where all coloured schools had to be called senior secondary school, and we just flat out refused, and we remained South Peninsula High School to this day. So and we were based in the school is still in Still on the wrong side of the tracks. So all these coloured kids would be traipsing in and out of a white community, and that also caused a lot of anxiety in the 80s, especially when we were boycotting
So when you talked about the sort of rich community life you experienced in Rashid, was that as part of a wider coloured community, or was that not part of the dynamic? You were talking before how you had a very sociable life around retreat. Lots of friends and activities. Was that within a coloured community, or
Yes. Almost exclusively.
Yeah, so that's why I was talking about the race factor. Was there a lot of integration? Did you have white friends? Did you have black friends? Was it
zero integration? My first black friend was at UCT. So,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The system worked very well. That's about it. So.
Yeah. Okay. So Heidi, through your latter years of school, was there a sense emerging within as to what you wanted to do with your life? You said you were quite good at school, you achieved good marks. Did you have a sense of the future?
So at junior school, I thought I'd be a ballerina.
Wow.
And then, that didn't work out, thankfully. And then I really enjoyed maths. And so I thought, if you do maths, you should do accounting. So I wanted to become an accountant. Thankfully, that didn't work out either. So in matric, my biology teacher was now the principal at SB, Mr. Baker. We did homeostasis, and I was fascinated that the body could regulate itself and fix itself, and all the systems that go on. And so I thought I would do medical microbiology because he had done it, my biology teacher. And so I went to UCD to do microbiology, biochemistry.
No. As the BSc,
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So UCT, not noted particularly in those days for its racial diversity. How was that experience for you?
It was a shock to the system, both academically and socially, because now you're hanging out with people who have access to all the things that you don't. And even though I came from a relatively middle class coloured community, compared to my peers, nowhere. Right? So they all living in digs in Onderbosch and just walk to campus, and you're trekking 2 hours back and forth every day. And so when you think about the impact of that on your study time, that's just one factor. But I was never acutely aware of that. You just do what you do and you get on with things. But started making friends across the kind of divide and starting to learn about people and their lives, and so really had a very rich experience of that. That's campus, yeah.
And did you enjoy the study? And did you have a sense of this is the right course for me? And I'm enjoying it.
Well, enjoying first year after coming from a covered school into UCT, no, it was awful because I was fairly high achiever at high school, and you get to university and you get 37%. You're like, what's even going on? So a lot of catching up, very stressful. But the experience was still great, even though because there were a few of us who were in that position, and we found each other and supported one another, and we managed to get things.
Okay, so you managed to complete your degree. What happened then?
Moved to a medical campus to do medical mycology because I wanted my research to matter. I'm not saying that I was a study on African research don't matter, but I've always had I wanted to do something in the health sector. But I didn't want to be a doctor because everyone said I should be a doctor. And if you ask my mother, I don't like doing that. People tell me to do. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I slightly regret it now because I think medical professionals have so much they can offer things to the community very easily, whereas like when you're a research scientist, can't really help you with that.
So what was your research focused on?
Antibiotic resistance and the emergence of drug resistance in hospital pathogens. So looking at epidemiology and that kind of thing.
Very relevant topic in
yes, now suddenly I have the vocab that everybody's throwing around like mRNA. I mean, nobody knew about that a few years ago.
Okay, so you managed to complete your research,
yeah,
and then move into
labs. It's good for your CV, and so I applied to University in New York and to Paris and Cambridge. And then had to decide where I'd like to go, and I chose the country with the language I can speak because I it's tried that for fun. But it was lovely. It was great.
So how long were you in Paris?
So I had a 2-year postdoctoral stint in Paris, doing antibiotic resistance research.
Okay. So when you did your research, that was getting a PhD, was it?
Yeah.
Right, and then postdoctoral in Paris, and I assume you have to learn to speak French.
Oui.
Petit peu. Okay. And how was the Paris experience?
The first month was hard because it's not Cape Town.
No.
But I grew up Methodist and was quite active in the Methodist church, and so I actually emailed my bishop, Bishop Cribble, and said, where's the church in Paris that I should go to? And he connected me with the British Embassy, and I found the Anglican Church, St. Michael's, in Paris. And then I had a community.
And was that English speaking?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I had a community and friends and just got involved there.
Wonderful. And did you take advantage of being in Paris to explore around Europe more broadly, or?
I explored France quite a bit. But didn't really have time to work, so I couldn't get away very much. And then when I did want to take a break, I came back to Cape Town to get some time. But I regret, I wish I had stayed on a bit and done some, 3 months of just traveling around.
And during these years, what was happening personally? Did you make anyone special when you were
my friends were quite shocked when I did tell them that and I looked up because they knew that I was just counting on the days to coming back to Cape Town. And that there was no way I was going to hook up with anyone in Paris because I'm coming to Cape Town. Because I love South Africa, and so I'm like, I'm going back. And they're like, oh, this is Paris. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't seen Cape Town. What are you talking about? But then Derek and I connected just in my last few months before I left.
So you met Derek
in church in Paris as in Michael.
For those who don't know Derek, maybe tell us a bit about him.
He's a Canadian. He was living and working in Paris, and we got to know each other and had some interests. He had spent a year in Liberia teaching at a school. And so I always teased him and said that I was his ticket back to Africa because he also really was very had this yearning to come back here.
So how did that work? You meet Derek towards the end of your stint in Paris when you were getting about coming home. So you come home and leave Derek in Paris, or how did that work?
Yeah, it's like, I'm going home, so you must do what you must do. And he came over a year later.
Okay, so, lots of communicating in the meantime.
Yeah. Luckily for us, 3 of our friends got married, 3 good friends got married in the following year, and so I had to go back to the wedding. And so we managed to see each other a couple of times in between. Yeah, so it wasn't so bad.
Great.
And this was all before like mobile phones and things.
Yeah.
I mean, we did have mobile phones,
but there was no FaceTime or a Skype or
Yes, wait for that text message.
Yes, imagine. So, what happened when you came back to Cape Town? Did you come back to a job?
Yeah, I came back to the department I was done my PhD in and to my supervisor. So I got a junior lecturer position. And started building my own research group. And started focusing more on antibiotic resistance in TB.
Okay. And I assume then Derek came back and got married.
And we had 2 lovely daughters who are absolutely delights, and the parents love the kids, but I think my kids were the coolest.
Obviously. That's wonderful. So, how did that sort of, having children work alongside career? Many mothers approach that in different ways. How did that for you?
It was tough because as a researcher, you're working all the time because you're reading papers, you're writing, so there's no downtime. And so really having to fight full time with the family, and so that's why we drop off time because it's easier. And then when I was on maternity leave after having Morgan, we were running after alpha group because we were at Christchurch in England. And we had a bunch of young people who were coming to the end of their university time and asking questions about what they didn't do next and stuff. So I was helping them process that, and I was like, wait a minute, when last did I check in to see if that's what if I'm doing what I should be doing? And God said, no, I'm you. And so that was a big shock. I was like, no. I run a research group, I've got my own money, I'm independent, so I can do what I want. No, I didn't get right.
So what did God say to move to?
As God does, he gathered 20 people or so around me who I looked like just random people, and within 2 weeks had 20 affirmations from various people about that it being the right thing to move out of research now. And I was like, wow, God knows I don't like to wait around. I'm not doing nothing. It's got to be quick.
So, okay, there's push and pull, moving out, but moving to what? Was there a vision, a sense of what it is you want to do?
Because I was always involved in church work, I always loved working with young people. And so I always said, when I'm finished doing research, I'm going to go back to working with young people. I just didn't know that my timeline was a lot shorter than I imagined. And so I knew that was the heart of it, but I didn't know what it was. And then in my the last couple of years at UCT, I was on the honors selection committee for our postgraduate course and trying to transform the university at an honors level when the applicants coming through undergrad are still all whites. There are no black and coloured applicants trying to get into our honors schools. So it's like, how do you transform the faculty when there are no applicants who will make it through the course? And so started asking those questions, and then eventually figured out that we know now that the pipeline is totally broken, and that I needed go and do something about it early on. In fact, I've gone grades 4th year honours or transformation in the education space. So,
well, that's identifying the need, but still, how do you address that?
yeah, and I was like, I'm a microbiologist. What can a microbiologist do about the education system, right? And a friend of mine, I still blame him. He said, but you've learned a whole bunch about the skills in running a research group. It's not microbiology. You learn all the things that you could easily transfer to another space. It's just about figuring out what you can do with those skills. So your ability to do research, to connect, to report on what's going on, to fundraise and researching, fundraising all the time. So fundraising all the time. So it's just moving those skills into something else. And so it was really, what am I passionate about? What am I going to do with the skills that I have?
So hence Outliers was born, and how did that idea germinate into a fully functioning entity?
Yeah, so I was connected because of Christchurch, Kenilworth, the warehouse was an offshoot from the parish, and so I had a connection there. And when I met with Craig Stewart, I said to him, this is what I'm interested in doing. And he had said that's where they had come to with their program, because they were running the Care for Kids, which was looking after orphans and vulnerable children, and realized that actually we need to assist them with they're getting older now, and this can help them figure out what they need to do. And so I joined the warehouse team and really had my full immersion in social development and what it means to work with people, not for them. Yeah. And so that really shaped my justice thinking and how to respond. And then we kind of iterated before we got to Outliers. And so they were doing very much the career guidance and helping kids think through how God's designed you, what do you want to do with your life now, what do you need in order to succeed, and very clearly help with maths and English, right? Because what's the point in telling someone you can be anything you want to be, except not that, because you don't have the grades, and that also not that, because and so it very quickly was actually an after-school program that helps kids with their homework is what's needed. And so we started an after-school program in 2010, and it's at St. Peter's in Melbourne, just opposite the bus rank, and got kids coming and started helping them. And then connecting with other spaces like that, realizing that Laura and I have access to social capital that others who run these spaces don't have. And it's because of our educational capital that we have. And so we know people at UCT, we can get tutors, we know who to ask about things. And so it's how do we now share that with others who don't have those connections. And so Outliers is really about us sharing what we have access to and channeling it into those who don't have that access. So we kind of conduit. So advice that passes through this all.
Yes, so it's for those of you your office now at RUC. So it's been going for how many years now?
Formally 7. That's when we launched it as Outliers, but we've been doing it since we started the first after-school program. So that's 11, 12 years ago.
Well, it's exciting to start something brand new and see it grow and develop. And, I mean, how has COVID affected your efforts?
Yeah, obviously with lockdown and everything, we were very concerned for these students who already didn't have access to the support that they would need for their education, and that these after-school programs provided the space for them, and now everything has been shut down. And so we connected with all the coordinators of the programs and asked them, what is it that you think you need in order to support kids during this phase? And they all said, we need printed stuff. We need books, textbooks, workbooks, so that we can get it to the kids, because lockdown happened before school closed. And so They weren't able to even take their textbooks home with them, or for teachers to give workbooks in, so nobody had anything. Except you could have a computer and access on it. But that's 10%, 20% of the country. So we're not talking about those kids. And so we very quickly set about putting together these EduPacks, which were workbooks based on the curriculum for each grade, using content that's available in open source. And then collected them, printed them, got donations of stationery and distributed them through our networks. And that was all through my garage. We converted my house into a packing, sorting, receiving, and dispatch unit. So wonderful.
So how do you refer a few times to your church background, Methodist, and Kenilworth, Christchurch? Tell us a little bit more about the role faith has played in your life, maybe how that's evolved over the years, and interested to hear, as part of that journey, how you ended up here at RUC.
So yes, grew up in the Methodist Church, very much a part of who I am and how I think I serve others as a servant leader. I think my dad modeled that. Also very much involved in the church and always available to be what was needed in any space. And when I got to Paris and went into the Anglican Church, kind of had to make the shift that actually it's not about trying to pull the words, but these silos that exist in church structures is like you either this or this or this. It's like we all are the same faith, just the slight traditions that change. And so that started breaking down that barrier for me. And then when Dad and I got married and looked for a church in Cape Town, that was a fun experience, traveling around the city looking for a church. Every church we ended up in, when we were visiting, something was happening in the church that day that was a special occasion. And there was some person they were celebrating, saying goodbye to or welcoming back. And we'd be boring our eyes out with this person we didn't even know. But it was such a powerful testament to how Christians are just, there's just this connection that we share, whether we know each other or not. You could totally relate to the depth of feeling that was going on because of this person in that family. And so we landed up at Christchurch in Kenilworth and spent a few years there. Christchurch then was supporting St. Peter's in Mowbray to help reinvigorate and asked a few of us to kind of go and help get that community going. And so we definitely went there with the kids. Got Darren quite involved in Sunday school for the first time, which he had not done before, and he loved it. A very good Sunday school teacher. It was quite cute because he was our girls' Sunday school teacher. And so they have this connection now that Danny told us the story about, so that was sweet. And then I think towards the end of 2016 when the kids was born, a lot of questions were emerging about systems and hierarchies and how the church, how that plays out in the responsibility of the church to end justice, and how in some spaces it's separate and in some spaces it's running the same thing. And for me, it's always been running the same thing. Like, I cannot imagine a faith that is not rooted in justice. And so felt a separation of that in the space that we were at. And couldn't be part of that anymore. And so and then started looking for a church again. And then found one right on our doorstep, which happened to be RUC. And we were like, wait, how did we not know this church was here before? And walking and immediately found, well, okay, Cassidy and Morgan, we did say to them that they could also weigh in on the church. What did they think about the music, or they think about the person who was speaking, or they think about the tea afterwards, which was a very important factor for them. And you guys served the best brownies they've ever had that day, and it was a winner. So we still have good brownies.
Hopefully a bit more than that as well. Yeah. Well, it's been great to have you as part of it. So, Heidi, you mentioned growing up, you were involved in all kinds of things, all kinds of interests and hobbies. Does that still apply? Do you have time, outside of outliers and mothering and to pursue other interests? What is it you like to do for fun?
Nothing. I do nothing. That's mine. Yeah. I think I try. You try to. Well, I try to ensure that what I'm doing is sustainable. So it's not that I'm living for the next break when I can do the thing that I enjoy. And so even while I'm working, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And it doesn't feel like I'm waiting for it all to be over. Yes, COVID has kept us very busy and I do need a break, but it energizes me at the same time. And so I don't feel like I need to stop. And that I don't need the space where I can entertain myself, because I make sure that that's happening all the time. And so we both in and have rhythms that ensures that we. So lockdown was hard because I am energized by people, and so not seeing people. But you understood that, right? But then the girls are at an age now where they are a great company, and so we really enjoy each other as a family unit, and so that was able to keep us entertained. And so I think for a part now, my hobby is being interested in what the girls are interested in, because their interests are all over the place at the moment, and so that's been fun. But no, I don't knit or I don't crochet. I don't run.
Retired from ballet?
Actually, I do go back to ballet every now and then, but haven't made it back in a while. So,
And a sense of the future. What's next for Heidi?
You mean after I fight with the WCD and shaker and anyway. Look, until every kid in South Africa has access to a space where they can do their homework and achieve at school, I think we're not going to be out of a job. And so Laura and Janine and I, we just keep it going. There are amazing people who are doing work in the space. And so every week is different. We meet new people, we find alignment, we work together, we get things done. And so that's great. I'd love to see it amplified, so that we can have a greater impact, but at the same time we're not chasing numbers. We invest in people who are doing work on the ground and making sure that they are sustained.
Yeah, there's lots to do.
Yeah, because
Okay, well, thank you so much, Heidi. It's been great to get to know you better and to hear more of your story. And we look forward to following with interest the growth and development of Outliers and winning these fights with the Education Department and making sure more young people have a chance to move into a sustainable future.
And thanks to all the people at Unquestioned with the support that we've had with Segal and Robert and everyone. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.